I never thought I'd be in this position. My wife, Emily, and I had been together for nearly a decade, married for 6 of those years. On paper, everything seemed great. We had a cozy home, stable jobs, and a relationship that most people would envy. But looking back, I realize now that the cracks were forming long before I chose to see them. Emily had always been outgoing, the life of the party, the kind of person who could walk into a room and have everyone's attention in minutes. I loved that about her, or at least I used to. Over the last few months, though, something about her energy shifted. It was no longer directed at us, at building a life together. Instead, it was like she was living in her own little world, and I was just a shadow in the background. It started subtly. She'd roll her eyes when I tried to share something I was excited about or dismiss my attempts to plan quality time together with a casual, "I'm too busy," or, "Can we do this another time?" First, I chalked it up to stress. Work had been hectic for both of us, and I figured we were just in one of those phases every marriage goes through. But then came the late nights. Suddenly, she was working overtime or meeting up with friends I'd never heard of. Her phone was always glued to her hand, and the screen dimmed just enough that I couldn't see what she was so invested in. When I asked about it, she'd laugh it off. "Relax, Daniel. Not everything's a conspiracy." I wanted to believe her, but the distance between us was growing. And the worst part? She didn't seem to care. I started feeling like a guest in my own marriage, an outsider looking in at something I used to be a part of. Little did I know the real storm was still coming. As the weeks passed, the distance between Emily and me only grew. Conversations became shorter, her smiles less frequent, and her patience with me seemed to evaporate. I found myself second-guessing everything. Was I not doing enough? Was I being too clingy? But every time I tried to talk to her, to figure out what was wrong, she brushed me off. "It's nothing, Daniel. You're reading too much into things," she'd say, her voice laced with irritation. One night, I suggested a date night, just the two of us like old times. I thought maybe if we spent some quality time together, we could reconnect. She agreed reluctantly. But when the night came, she spent more time scrolling through her phone than talking to me. At one point, I asked her who she was texting, and she snapped, "Do you have to know every little thing I do?" That was the first time I felt a pang of real doubt. There was a defensiveness in her tone that didn't sit right with me. Still, I tried to push it aside. After all, we were married. I trusted her. Didn't I? The following week, things took another turn. Emily started coming home later than usual, often smelling of expensive perfume she rarely wore around me. She started dressing up more, even for casual outings, and when I asked her where she was going, her answers were vague. "Just meeting some friends," she'd say with a shrug. When I pressed for details, she'd get defensive. "Why do you care? It's just dinner. Stop being so insecure." Insecure. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't trying to control her. I just wanted to understand what was happening to us. But every time I tried to bridge the gap, it felt like she built another wall between us. The final straw came when she casually mentioned a New Year's Eve party hosted by one of her friends. "It'll be fun," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Besides, you could use a little excitement." Looking back, I should have known something was off, but I convinced myself that this party might be the perfect opportunity to reconnect. Little did I know, it would be the night that shattered everything. The New Year's Eve party was at Emily's friend Lisa's house, a sprawling place with too many people and too much noise. Emily had spent hours getting ready, slipping into a dress that hugged her curves in a way I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and she wore a perfume I didn't recognize. She looked incredible, but instead of feeling proud to be by her side, I felt uneasy. When we arrived, Emily seemed to light up. She greeted people with hugs and laughter, her mood completely different from the cold indifference I'd grown used to at home. I wanted to think it was just the holiday spirit, but something didn't sit right with me. Almost immediately, she drifted away to mingle, leaving me to fend for myself. I tried to make small talk with a few people, but my attention kept wandering back to her. She was across the room, laughing too loudly and leaning a little too close to some guy I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair slicked back and a smirk that made my skin crawl. His name, I'd later learn, was Mark. For most of the night, Emily and Mark were inseparable. They laughed together, whispered in corners, and exchanged glances that made my stomach turn. Every time I tried to approach them, Emily would wave me off with some excuse. "Just catching up with an old friend, Daniel," she said at one point, her tone dismissive. "Why don't you go grab a drink or something?" I did as she suggested, but my mind was racing. Something was going on, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't until later in the evening that I saw it. Emily and Mark were standing near the bar, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they laughed at something I couldn't hear. Then he slipped something into her hand, a small folded piece of paper. Emily glanced around nervously before tucking it into her purse, her lips curling into a sly smile. My heart sank. Whatever it wasn't innocent. I clenched my fists, my mind spinning with anger and suspicion. I knew I had to find out what was on that note, no matter what. My pulse raced as I stood there, watching Emily and Mark share another laugh, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't shake the image of that note, folded neatly in her purse, like a secret mocking me. I knew I had to act, and I knew it had to be now. I waited for the perfect moment. Emily excused herself to the restroom, leaving her purse casually draped over the back of a chair. My hands were shaking as I approached it, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I had to know. I needed proof that my gut wasn't lying to me. I reached into the bag, my fingers brushing past her wallet and phone until I found the piece of paper. Folding it open, I read the words scrawled across it in sloppy handwriting. "Meet me upstairs at midnight. Let's make this the kind of New Year's we'll never forget. Mark." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My vision blurred as a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me. My hands clenched the note so tightly that the edges started to tear. Midnight. That was in less than 20 minutes. I shoved the note into my pocket, my jaw set as I tried to decide what to do. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Rage, humiliation, disbelief. I wanted to confront her right there, to expose her in front of everyone. But something held me back. No, not yet. If I was going to do this, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Midnight was approaching, and the room was alive with noise and laughter as the countdown to the new year began. But I wasn't celebrating. I was watching Emily like a hawk, waiting for her next move. She returned from the restroom, her expression carefree and her laugh even louder as she rejoined the group. I tried to act normal, forcing a smile when someone wished me a happy new year. But inside, I was boiling. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Emily started to drift away from the crowd. She glanced at her phone, then subtly caught Mark's eye from across the room. It was all so rehearsed, so deliberate. She gave him a quick nod, then slipped out of the main party area and headed upstairs. My chest tightened. This was it. All my suspicions, all the doubts I tried to bury, they were about to be confirmed. I followed her, keeping my distance as I climbed the stairs. My hands were shaking, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears as I reached the hallway. The house was quieter up here, away from the noise and chaos of the party. I moved silently, following the faint sound of voices coming from one of the bedrooms. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see them. Emily and Mark. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her laughter hushed and flirtatious as he stood in front of her, leaning down to whisper something in her ear. She placed her hand on his chest, a gesture so intimate it made me feel sick. Then she said something I'll never forget. Finally, sometime alone. "I've been waiting for this all night." I froze. The words hit me like a freight train, each one heavier than the last. All the doubts, the excuses, the lies. It all became crystal clear in that moment. Emily wasn't just drifting away from me. She had already left. I felt my stomach churn as I watched Mark lean in closer, his hands resting on her thighs. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed the door open with a force that made it slam against the wall. The sound startled them, and they jumped apart like guilty teenagers caught sneaking around. What the hell is this? I shouted, my voice raw with anger. Emily's eyes widened in shock, but it quickly turned into something else. Defiance. Daniel, what are you doing? She snapped, as if I was the one in the wrong. What am I doing? I yelled, holding up the crumpled note from my pocket. What the hell is this, Emily? Meeting him upstairs at midnight? Is this what our marriage means to you? Mark tried to step in, raising his hands in some pathetic attempt to calm me down. Hey man, this isn't what it looks like. Shut up, I snarled, cutting him off. You don't get to talk. Emily stood up, crossing her arms like she had nothing to apologize for. You're overreacting, Daniel. It was just a stupid, meaningless thing. You're making a scene. Making a scene? I repeated, my voice shaking with disbelief. You're sneaking off with another man at a party, and I'm the problem? I could see it in her face. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. If anything, she looked annoyed that I'd caught her. The air in the room was thick with tension, the sound of the party downstairs fading into the background as I stared at Emily, my wife, the woman I had trusted with everything. And here she was, standing in front of me with that smug, unapologetic look plastered across her face. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice trembling as anger surged through me. Do you even care about what you've done? About what this means for us? Emily rolled her eyes, as if I were an annoying child throwing a tantrum. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Daniel. It's not like we're soulmates or something. People flirt, things happen. You're just blowing this out of proportion. Her words were like gasoline on a fire. I turned to Mark, who had the audacity to still be standing there, looking uncomfortable but not nearly guilty enough. And you? I spat, stepping closer to him. What kind of man sneaks around with another guy's wife? You think you're some kind of hero, huh? Mark stammered, trying to step back. Look, man, I didn't know it was. Don't even try it. I cut him off, pointing a finger at his chest. You knew exactly what you were doing. Both of you did. Emily sighed loudly, like she was bored of the whole thing. Oh, for God's sake, Daniel, grow up. We've been miserable for months. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of your precious work, we wouldn't be here. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even pretending to care about how much she had hurt me. Instead, she was shifting the blame, making it seem like this was my fault. Miserable, I echoed, my voice rising. You've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to me, disrespecting me, and now you're going to act like you're the victim? Emily shrugged, completely unfazed. Maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. I felt my hands clench into fists at my sides. The room was spinning, my vision narrowing as the sheer audacity of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I turned to Mark again, who was now inching toward the door. Oh no, you're not going anywhere, I said, stepping in his path. You wanted to sneak around with my wife? You're going to face the consequences. Before I could think twice, I grabbed him by the collar and shoved him backward. He stumbled, hitting the edge of the dresser with a thud. Emily screamed, rushing toward me, but I wasn't about to let him off easy. This wasn't just about him. It was about everything I had been bottling up for months. Mark scrambled to his feet, his face pale and his hands raised defensively. Look, I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he stammered. His excuses only fueled my anger, but I wasn't going to lose control. Not yet. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. Acting impulsively would only give Emily more ammunition to paint me as the bad guy. Get out, I growled, my voice low and steady. Mark hesitated, looking to Emily for help, but she simply crossed her arms and glared at me, saying nothing. I said, "Get out," I barked, stepping toward him. Mark didn't need to be told a third time. He bolted for the door, brushing past me without so much as a glance back. That left me alone with Emily, the woman I thought I knew, the woman who was now staring at me like I was the villain in her story. "Congratulations," she said with a sarcastic smirk. "You've successfully embarrassed both of us. Hope you're proud of yourself." Embarrassed, I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. You've humiliated me, Emily. You've destroyed our marriage. And for what? A fling with some loser you met at a party. She shrugged, her nonchalance cutting deeper than any words could. Maybe I was tired of being married to someone who's so predictable. Face it, Daniel, you're not exactly exciting. I stood there, staring at her, the woman I had loved for so long. I realized then that she wasn't just selfish. She was cruel. Every word out of her mouth was designed to hurt me, to shift the blame, to justify her betrayal. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it. You want excitement, Emily? I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. Fine, let's make this night unforgettable. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face. What's that supposed to mean? Without answering, I pulled out my phone. Over the past few months, I had grown increasingly uneasy about Emily's behavior, and tonight, I was glad I had trusted my instincts. I had installed a discreet app that synced our shared devices, a precaution I hoped I'd never need. But now it was my trump card. I tapped a few buttons, pulling up a series of messages exchanged between Emily and Mark. Explicit, shameless texts that left no doubt about what had been going on between them. Emily's face paled as I held the phone up for her to see. You think you're so clever, I said, my tone icy. But you're not. I have everything. Every disgusting message. Every lie you told. And now I have options. Her confidence faltered, and for the first time all night, I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. Daniel, let's not do anything we'll regret, she said, her voice softer now, but still laced with arrogance. We can talk about this. Work something out. Oh, we're going to work something out. All right, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. But not the way you think. Emily stood frozen, her cocky facade cracking for the first time as she realized I wasn't bluffing. I had all the proof I needed, and she knew it. Still, I wasn't about to make it easy for her. This wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was about making sure she understood the weight of her betrayal. You think this is just going to blow over, Emily? I asked, my voice calm but laced with venom. You think you can cheat, lie, and humiliate me, and I'll just let you walk away without consequences? Her defiance flared up again, but I could see the unease in her eyes. What do you want, Daniel? A big dramatic fight? You've already embarrassed me in front of Mark, and you've got your little text messages. Congratulations. Now what? You're going to run crying to a divorce lawyer? I smirked. Oh, I'll get to that part. But first, I think it's only fair everyone knows who you really are. Her jaw tightened. What are you talking about? I pulled my phone out again, scrolling through the messages until I found the incriminating screenshots I had saved earlier. You see, Emily, I could keep this private. I could just take these to a lawyer, file for divorce, and be done with you. But where's the lesson in that? No, I think your friends, your family, and even your precious coworkers deserve to know what kind of person you are. Her face went pale, her composure cracking as the weight of my words sank in. Daniel, don't you dare, she hissed, her voice trembling now. This is between us. You don't need to drag other people into it. Oh, but you dragged Mark into it, didn't you? I shot back. You had no problem sneaking around, texting him, meeting him while I was at work. You weren't worried about keeping things private then, were you? She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For once, she had nothing to say. I didn't wait for her to recover. I walked past her, down the stairs, and into the party where the countdown to midnight was already underway. People were laughing, cheering, and oblivious to the storm brewing in the house. I could feel Emily following me, her footsteps quick and frantic as she tried to stop me. 10, 9, 8. The crowd was counting down, but I had my own agenda. I reached the center of the room and held up my phone. Hey, everyone, I called out, my voice cutting through the noise. The countdown faltered as people turned to look at me, their expressions a mix of curiosity and confusion. Emily froze behind me, her face a mask of panic. I just want to wish my wife, Emily, a happy new year, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And while we're at it, I think we should all take a moment to thank her for showing us the true meaning of loyalty. With that, I tapped the screen, casting the damning text messages onto the TV in the living room for everyone to see. The crowd gasped, their cheers turning to stunned silence as the messages scrolled across the screen. Explicit, undeniable evidence of Emily's affair with Mark. Emily lunged for me, her voice a desperate whisper. "Turn it off, Daniel. Stop this right now." But it was too late. The damage was done. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, whispers, and awkward laughter filled the air as Emily's dirty laundry played out on the TV for everyone to see. Mark, who had been trying to blend into the crowd, bolted for the door like a guilty teenager caught sneaking out. No one stopped him. Emily turned on me, her face red with fury and humiliation. "You're a monster, Daniel. How could you do this to me?" "To you," I shot back, my voice cold. "You did this to yourself, Emily. You disrespected me, our marriage, and now you're upset that people know the truth? Save it." She looked around the room, but no one came to her defense. The friends she had charmed so easily earlier now stared at her with disgust, muttering under their breath. Someone even laughed when she tried to storm out, tripping over her heels in the process. As she fled, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, relief, sadness. This wasn't how I had imagined the night ending, but it was the closure I needed. I had stood up for myself, and for the first time in months, I felt free. By the time the party ended, people avoided eye contact, unsure of what to say. I didn't care. I grabbed my coat, left the house, and walked into the crisp night air, leaving behind the shattered pieces of a life I no longer wanted.